So guys, now let's start with our data validation. So for this, I'm going to create another file inside research or 02 data validation .ipynb. So let me select my kernel. Now similar wise, I will execute this line of code just to get back to my project working directory. Now see, everything would be common as of now, whatever we have done, only the logic would be different. Okay, that's it. Now you can see that I'm inside my project working directory. Now see what exactly we're gonna perform inside data validation. That means here we'll be validating the data. Let's say the data actually we're having. So it is having some feature, yes or no. Let's say fixed acidity, volatile acidity, and so on. And based on that, I have to predict the quality of the wine. Okay, I think you know. So here, first of all, I have to check. Let's say the data actually we are using, it is having all the column or not. Okay, all the column or not. If any of the columns is missing, that means this data is not correct data. So that time what we'll do, will not start the training, we'll raise the exception to the user. Your data is not in a correct format, so try to give the correct data. Okay, otherwise if it is true, that means all the columns are exist, I will try to proceed with the training, because at the end training would be costly, right? If I'm taking any, let's say, instance to the cloud platform, and there if I'm training my model, okay, so it would be costly. And if my one of the column is missing, that time I won't be getting my desired output. So why you will be doing the unnecessary computation there, right? So that's why first of all we have to check the data, whether our data is in correct format or not. If it is correct format, then we'll start with the training. Otherwise we'll stop the training. Okay, we'll raise the exception. This is the idea. So first of all, let me show you the data. So let me import the pandas library and let me read the data. So you can see data is available inside Artifact data ingestion and one quality red CSV. Now if I show you the data, see, this is the data. And if I show you the information, so it is having this many of column, okay, and this is the data type of the column, okay, and this is our target variable, quality of the wine. Now what I have to do, guys, based on that I have to create one schema file. I think you remember we created one schema.yaml. Now I already created the schema. See, this is the schema. Okay, that means the columns, your all the columns, you can see all the columns here I have defined. Based on that I have also defined the data type of the column, and I also defined my target column, which is nothing but quality. Now with the help of this YAML file, what we'll do, we'll just try to validate. We'll just try to read our data and we'll check whether all the columns are exist or not. Okay, all the columns are exist or not. If it is exist, status would be true, otherwise status would be false. This is the simple code we'll be implementing. Now let me show you how it can be done. Before that, let me show you the configuration. That means data validation related variable. So this is the data validation variable. That means it will create another folder called data validation. Inside that, it will actually validate the data. That means it will create a status.txt file. Inside status.txt file, it will say whether validation status is true or it's false. If it is true, that means data is correct. If it is false, data is not correct. Okay, this is the idea. And this is my data path. Like where we'll be reading the data, we'll be reading the data from the Artifact data ingestion wine quality red.csv. Okay, and this folder would be created. That's it. Now with the help of that, let's create the entity. So let me show you how to create the entity. So this is the entity, guys. You can see I'm returning only this variable only. Okay, one by one. And one more extra variable I'm using called all schema. That means this schema file I also need to read, right? And I have to like return all the let's say column as a dictionary. Okay, that's why it's a dictionary type. I'll tell you whenever we'll execute the code, that time you'll get the idea. Now I have to create the configuration manager. So let me create the configuration manager. So I think you remember we have to import these at the library. Then this is going to be my configuration manager. Inside that I'm reading the YAML file, creating the directory, and this is my data validation configuration, and this is the return type. The return type we have defined, and inside that you can see I'm returning all the variable, root directory, status file, unzip directory, and all schema I'm getting from the schema itself. You can see all column schema. Okay, so here we're reading the schema file and we are returning all the column. That means it will give me all the column name. Okay, and this column name I'll get as a dictionary. Okay, I'll get as a dictionary and I'll match. Okay, I'll match with my let's say actual column of my data. This is the idea. Now let me execute. Now I have to create the component. So let's create the component. Let me import these at the library. And this is the simple Python verification code I have written, guys. See, this is nothing complex. Data validation, you can see the class is data validation. Inside that, it will take the data validation configuration and it will validate all the column. That means first of all, status should be none. It will read the CSV file, that means actual data. It will list down all the column. Okay, then I will get all the keys, okay, from my configuration. That means this schema, it will be a dictionary. And if I want to get the keys, guys, so it will be the keys, okay, because this is the value, I think, remember. Okay, I need all the keys. So you can see I'm getting all the keys. Then after that, I'm writing one for loop. Inside that, I'm checking if column is not all schema, validation would be false. Okay, and you have to write this validation in a txt file, otherwise it would be true. Okay, and I'm returning the validation status. It's a very simple code, very simple verification code. Now here, one more verification layer you can add. You can also check the data type, whether it's a float or not, whether it's a float or not. Okay, that's how you can also check the data type. So here I haven't checked the data type because you can see all the data is in a float format. Okay, float format. That's why I don't need to check the data type. But if you're having multiple data type, you can also add another layer. You can add another for loop. Okay, inside that, and you can also check the data type, whether this column is having this data type or not. Okay, so this second layer verification you can also add. See, whatever Python, let's say, logic you have learned, same thing you can apply here. So I'm not teaching you the Python, how to write the Python code, you know that, right? I'm only showing you the strategy, how we can follow. That's it. Now after that, let me execute. And last thing, I have to create the pipeline as well. So let me create the pipeline and let me show you the execution. So this is going to be my pipeline. Configuration manager, getting the data validation config and passing it to my component, and I'm executing this particular function. That means it will validate the data. So if I execute in the artifact, it will create another folder called data validation. Inside that is status.txt. Now you can see status is true. Okay, that means all columns are exist. Now let's say by chance one of the columns is missing. Let's say this columns is missing. Okay, now if I execute the code again, so I have to execute from again here. Now see, it should be false because one column is missing here. Okay, I hope you got it. How this thing will work, your data validation will work. Okay, now let me delete this artifact because I'm going to create the component. That means my modular coding, there I will be executing all of the code. Now let's try to convert this code as our modular coding.